What are some of the most secret documents that are known to exist? Thousands of documents from World War II were classified and can only be published after 2045. I bet the Vatican has some insane stuff in its archives, like alternative Bible stuff and old church writings, maybe some originals or something. The most interesting items in the Vatican archives are the letters by various heads of state. Leaders of countries around the world have bared their souls to the Pope in personal letters, asking for religious guidance. The Vatican seals all of those for a really long time, so that the next generation of leaders has confidence that they can be open with the Pope without risking their image or national secrets. Imagine being able to read what Kennedy or Truman said to the Pope when the weight of nuclear warfare pressed on their souls. Payroll for US informants abroad. Those documents definitely exist, but the actual contents of them is definitely ultra super duper maximum secret. Department of Defense has a black budget that only some member of the executive and some members of Congress get to see. This is what annoys me about the Pentagon lost $X billions talking point. They didn't lose it. They just can't tell where it went because it was used for things that are so top secret that only 10 people know about it. The letter of last resort. In the UK, one of the first things the Prime Minister does on taking office is write a letter of last resort to be placed in each of the UK's nuclear submarines that gives instructions to the captain in the event that the government entirely ceases to exist. When a Prime Minister leaves office, their letters are destroyed without ever being opened. I wonder what they did for the Prime Minister, whose term was shorter than a submarine rotation. No matter who attacked us, nuke France for old time's sake. Tell my wife I said hello. The Epstein visitor logs. Secret and top secret documents, depending on the country in question, dealing with key governmental deliberations, can be withheld from the public for 25 to 30 years. In the UK, I believe that the King's and Queen's personal archives are held back for 100 years. The BBC Radio 4 used to do a fun series called UK Confidential, which involved installments when new secret documents were released. It was really great. They would interview folks who were still around and part of the action from the time in question, and would use voice actors to read the key documents. They had someone do a dead-on Thatcher, among others. It is cool to hear the deliberations from the time of the events. It is the real inside story. Some of the events are heavy, but some are light and funny. I was posted to the Defence Academy of the UK, and every so often, you'd have to do station checking officer duties, which involves making sure all the weapons are still in the armoury, and the fuel cards haven't been nicked, etc. And one of the duties is to do a random spot check of the secret archives, where you pick 10 or so documents randomly from the logbook, and the librarian brings them out, and you just sign to say they're still there. Now the Defence Academy houses loads of research type stuff, and one of the documents was titled Future Tank Program, and I was super curious, and technically I had clearance, although I still shouldn't have, and picked that one, so I could have a little poke around in it. It was all super technical, and I didn't recognize anything except the silhouette of the tank, which was definitely the Challenger 1. So it turns out it's a lot of paperwork to declassify stuff, so most of it stays secret for ages, because no one cares enough to change that. Edit. For those not familiar, designing of the Challenger 1 tank began in like the late 70s. Nothing about it has been secret since probably before I was born. Scotland Yard's investigation into Jack the Ripper is still sealed to the public. The recipe for green pigment used to make US currency. Some of my favorites are personal notes that people leave for one another at key jobs. It's a known fact that every former president of the United States has left a note in the desk for his successor. Some of those would be very interesting to read. Also, it's not uncommon for bands, athletes or artists to leave notes for each other before or after performances at large venues. It would be cool to see some of those, especially because there has to be some unexpected crossovers. Documents relating to government spy programs, national defense technology, etc. Coca-Cola formula. I would like to point out that Christopher Lee's World War II service records are still classified, and the interview with Peter Jackson is probably the most we'll get for a while. Christopher Lee knows the exact sound a man makes when stabbed in the lungs for a reason. Not exactly a document, but one of the most highly sensitive individual pieces of information in the world is the private key used to sign the DNS root zone. There are only 2 copies of this key, which are held in highly secure facilities controlled by ICANN. Whenever one of these keys, or one of several similarly sensitive ones, needs to be accessed, which happens a few times per year, a highly elaborate and scripted procedure known as a key ceremony is carried out. These are even streamed live on the internet to allow for maximum public transparency during the process. Nikola Tesla's documents that were taken away by the FBI after his death. Apparently Trump's physicist uncle was one of the experts given access to the papers by the FBI to see if there was anything worthwhile in them. That, in turn, led to a Conan-adjacent conspiracy that either Trump or his uncle built and used a time machine based on a design by Tesla. The NKVD archive. The Russian government allowed access to some of the archive during Glasnost, but this practice shuttered when Putin came to power. Vasily Mitrokhin, a KGB archivist that defected to Great Britain, gave several trunks worth of handwritten notes on the contents of the archive to MI6. These notes form the primary sources for the book The Sword and the Shield, the Mitrokhin archive, and the secret history of the KGB. One memorable revelation from the book is the story of what really happened to an NKVD detachment in the Odessa catacombs. During the siege of Odessa, official SVR Russian Foreign Intelligence Service history recounts the detachment valiantly, fighting against the Germans to the last man. In reality, they descended into madness and killed each other well before the Germans even got there. I often wonder what else is in that archive. The data Unit 731 collected. The data regarding the effects of biological and chemical weapons will probably never be released, even if they didn't use such inhumane methods to collect them. From what we do know, Unit 731 basically treated all their prisoners as lab rats, running sadistic experiments purely for their own curiosity and enjoyment. I doubt Japan or the US will ever reveal the documents in their possession, since it highlights the brutal behavior of Japan and the blunder of granting immunity for former members of the unit. The minutes of the First Council of Nicaea. This one borders on legend, myth, as the only people who can confirm it even exists have kept it in secret in the vaults of the Vatican. And if they do exist, they would be 1700 years old. Council of Nicaea is commonly known as the first ecumenical council that created the first known uniform Christian doctrine. Most people familiar with this know what came from it was the accepted origins of Christ, the date and celebration of Easter, and the establishing of canon law. One significant thing missing is the discussion of accepted Gospels to later become the New Testament. In fact, there is no known existing record of any discussion of biblical canon at the First Council. Kind of a huge omission from history. What is mostly not known are the parts they decided to leave out, and their reasons for doing so. The only known dissenting opinion on record at the First Council was Arius' claim that Jesus was created out of nothing, not begotten, born from a mortal womb. One of the main reasons in having the First Council was to declare this as heresy. The only official document released to the general public was the Nicene Creed. But this is the finished product. It's presented as though they created the final product as they went along. Historians agree it's extremely likely several scribes were taking minutes of the meetings that were later organized into the final creed, which itself was revised, of course, 4 decades later. The theory is Emperor Constantine kept the minutes in the ecumenical archives of Constantinople, or kept them in Rome, either way later to be locked away in the vaults of the Vatican. Sigma 14. DO category for information about scenarios where the security systems that prevent the misuse of nuclear weapons are bypassed or otherwise defeated. Sigma 20. DO category for innovative or otherwise especially sensitive improvised nuclear devices. INDs allow attackers to break into a storage facility containing fissile material and construct a crude but functional nuclear bomb on site using equipment they've either brought along or repurposed. No need to abscond with the material, just set it off right there and then. Write in the comments which secret documents definitely exist. Thanks for watching. Subscribe.